What happens when this fear becomes your reality? Hi, I'm Brent Cassidy. Welcome to the Nightmare Success In and Out podcast, where we explore how to overcome your fears and nightmares to set yourself free. We're going to be exploring this topic with guys that was in Leavenworth with, and others who survived their own nightmare. These stories can be inspiring, sometimes sad. There's some humor, but hopefully you can come away with a nugget of something that'll help you knock down some of the prisons you built up in your own mind. All right, welcome back, Nightmare Success and Out listeners. We're back. Hey, don't forget to follow, subscribe, share, do all that good stuff that helps the show. You know, this is where you come for what happens when your worst fear becomes your reality. How do you adapt, survive, overcome, set yourself free? Well, I've got somebody here I've really been excited to talk to because we had a really good conversation on the phone, and her story is like if you were going to binge like a Netflix series, you know, and you like it's a Sunday, it's raining out, and you're like, oh my gosh, this has a successful doctor, this has an affair, this has drugs, this has prison, this has like somebody that's navigating through all this mess and comes out on the other side. It's got it all. I mean, it has it all. Myra is just a super interesting person and very engaging, and I'm a big fan of hers. And she has survived this nightmare. And the thing that she told me that I thought was, I mean, she was serious when she was saying this, but she said, you know, one day she was on a European trip and she comes back, and all in one day, all in one phone call, she has to tell her parents that she's been indicted, that she has she's bisexual and she's an addict, and it's all there. It's all in one phone call, and it's like, oh my God, I can't even imagine what that would have felt like all at once. And she was dealing with it all at once. I can't wait to unpack all this with Myra. But before we do that, Myra Mabry, let's recognize the show sponsor. It's Auto Plaza Direct. You know, who likes going, spending a couple of weekends, walking car lots, looking for a car. You find the car, and then you spend 4 or 5 hours in the dealership to buy the car. And it's kind of like getting a root canal. Well, there's a better way to take away all that pain and hassle of getting a car. It's called Auto Plaza Direct. They are your personal car concierge. Just tell them the car you want, what you can pay, and they'll go find that car for you. They'll negotiate your best price. They also offer you warranties and financing. It's all full service. Go to autoplazadirect.com to get started with your personal car concierge, the new hassle-free way, the car buying experience you deserve. Auto Plaza Direct. Tell them Brent from Nightmare Success sent you. Myra Mabry, welcome in. How are you?
Thank you, Brent. I'm fantastic. And boy, my suitcase looks really big the way you explain it.
Well, you know, I mean, you have one of those like stories that, because a lot of people think, you know, when you become a doctor that, you know, like, you know, you go to a doctor's office and you don't even think doctors have any problems. You know, it's like the doctors are put up on a pedestal and they just go to work and they take care of people, and you call them doctor, and you expect that, you know, there's just this thing that they're like a judge. You know, you look at a judge that sits up on a pedestal, you know, and doctors they're real people, you know, they have a life, and things happen. And you had everything going on all at once at the same time. But let's go back a little bit, because
Yeah, in my case, a lot of things are going on. So, I said, you know, the people in general believe that doctors, you know, are just like untouchable and infallible and have this perfect life. And it's interesting because a lot of doctors feel that way too. And
Yes.
there is an arrogance and an ego that goes along with being a physician. And I mean, I was an OB-GYN, and, you know, that first time I made an incision for a C-section, I'm like, I am literally like cutting into human flesh. There
Yeah.
has to be a level of arrogance with that.
Yeah. Yeah. That's big.
It is big. It's really big. So there has to be a touch of it, but putting it into, you know, into perspective. And you'll probably hear that word a lot from me throughout this whole conversation, perspective. If I didn't learn anything else, I learned perspective through this
Yeah.
process.
Yeah.
So that was really big. And, that's what introduced me to opioids too, was medicine. And, they kind of thought they were above it as well. So it's definitely
Well,
complicated.
it does get complicated, and all that's available, as a doctor, that you are able to walk a line or you can fall off. But when a doctor falls off the line, it's a serious fall off because they have so much around them that is available to them. Myra, when you were growing up, was this something like, were your parents doctors? How did you, as a kid growing up, what was your life like? What was mom and dad, siblings? What was your world like then?
So I grew up on a farm.
Okay.
And that's where I learned my work ethic without question, because, the animals have to be fed no matter what. The garden
Yeah.
has to be protected no matter what, because that's your food. I didn't know that grocery stores existed until fourth grade when I broke my arm. I mean,
That's crazy.
isn't that insane?
Wow.
I mean, everything was from the farm, or it was canned, or it was frozen, the white packages of meat with the blue tape on it, bacon.
Yeah.
And that's how I grew up. I mean, I guess we
Myra,
have
you
to.
know what's funny about that? Because my grandparents, they were on a farm. And one thing I remember talking about things being labeled is that my grandma had this like milk jug, and it was I sometimes I thought it was, when I was a little kid, I thought it was milk. And why'd she keep it out? It was full of bacon grease, and she just scooped stuff out of there and threw it in the pan, and it went with everything. It tasted so good, but it
Everything.
was right there all the time.
Coffee can. It was a Folgers metal coffee can, but we
There you
had the
go.
same thing, the
Yep.
exact same thing. So, I grew up on a farm, and that helped me with my work ethic without question, because I didn't know anything else.
Mm-hmm.
Um, my father, so interesting parental situation. My mother was adopted. The guy I grew up with as dad is not my biological father, so I don't really have any history, which is important later because I've struggled with cancer. So I didn't know that as a kid, but I always knew something was not right.
Mm.
Like, I didn't know it at the time, but I've gone through a lot of therapy, and looking back at things, I realized I always had that feeling of not belonging, not being enough,
Mm.
just not being right. And my coping skill and my role in, an alcoholic family was to be the hero child. I did
Mm-hmm.
everything perfectly. I was an absolute overachiever. I played 3 sports
Were you
every
the
season.
oldest? Were you the
I
oldest
believe
of?
it or not, I was the youngest. I acted like
Wow.
the oldest.
Yeah. Okay.
I always protected my sister. My
Mm-hmm.
parents went through a 5-year divorce. We had to testify. It was my mom's family on one side, my dad's family on the other. We were
How
in
old
the
were you when
back.
that happened? How old were you at that stage?
Started in 6th grade and didn't end until 10th grade.
That's a tough time period too.
It's a very formidable time period.
Yeah.
And a
Wow.
lot of things came out at that time. At that time is when I found out that the guy I call dad, still considered my dad, was not my biological father, and it kind of came out as a weapon during the
Mm.
divorce, and it was really nasty. And I look at that as a turning point in my life, as when things started to go downhill. But of
How did you
course,
feel about that, Myra? I mean, that's such a, like, that's a movie thing, finding out that the guy that you think is your dad is not your biological dad.
and the way it happened, I can walk back into it right now. I can tell you, I was wearing a peach terry cloth outfit, a little terry cloth shirt, and peach terry cloth shorts with a little tie on the side. It was a beautiful sunny day. We were standing out by a hay wagon. We used to sell antiques out front by a hay wagon. And my dad asked my sister and I to walk out there. And he's like, we're going through a lot, but I have to tell you, in case you ever want to donate a kidney to each other or something, he looked right at me and he says, I'm not your father.
Oh, wow.
And
Wow.
he said that mom had an affair. My mom said she was raped, and they're both gone now. And I never found out the truth.
Mm.
Even through
Wow.
everything I went through, going through cancer, going to prison, begging for the truth, I never got it.
Did you and your mom ever talk about it?
She refused.
She
And,
just didn't talk. She didn't want to talk about it.
didn't want to talk about it.
Mm.
I kind of grew up in the era, was born in the 60s, and in that era, you didn't talk about it. You just put it under the rug and you moved on. And that's just how things were dealt with.
And so did you think that with all that going on, that because you were an overachiever, was that like your escape to like
That was my coping mechanism. And that's how I tried to feel accepted by my parents. Like, I am worth it. I want you to love the fact that you brought me into this world, no matter what the circumstances are. I am good enough. I am wanted. And I tried to do everything I could to prove that. I didn't just play sports. I was the captain of the sport. I wasn't just in the marching band. I was the drum majorette of the marching band. I wasn't just in the musical. It was fame and I had to be Coco. Like, everything was like that.
Well, that's a lot for a kid.
Yeah.
Plus a lot of extra weight, stress to perform.
But it got me really far in life.
Sure it did.
Until it didn't. A lot of people in our situation who are just as impacted or who are addicts, their negative coping skills got them through a lot.
Sure.
Until it didn't.
Yeah. It worked until it didn't.
Exactly.
So you got through school, high school. What were you thinking when you left high school? Was that like, I'm out on the big frontier and I'm going to conquer the world? Like, what was your next big thing you were thinking?
I was very sheltered, lived in a very small town, sheltered from anything in this world, sheltered from diversity, sheltered from drugs, sheltered from violence, gangs. It was upstate New York, like 6 hours north of New York City, extremely sheltered.
Beautiful area, though. I've been up that way. Yeah.
So gorgeous. So gorgeous. And I went to college inside the Blue Line at St. Lawrence University in the Adirondacks. Really beautiful. Very close to where the Olympics were, twice. And the only way I got to go to college, we were very poor, farming, farmers in upstate New York, is I got a full tuition scholarship.
So you got a full scholarship. Of course you did. So,
well, of course, because that's how I run, right?
That's right.
If I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it big. Like,
yes, get that full scholarship.
I'm not going to go to county. I'm not going to go to state. I'm going to
That's right.
Do it right.
So you roll into college. What's college like for you? What's your college world like? Because a lot of times that's where you really grow up, because everybody's kind of the same age. They're doing the same thing. And
yeah, it's where I grew up. It's where my blinders came off. There's, St. Lawrence is a wannabe Ivy League school. So that you've got, the dichotomy, the absolute split of people. You have the very, very rich who paid cash. And then you have the rest of us who are on full tuition scholarship. And there's nothing in between. You have the people who came there with their Mercedes and 3 of their horses and all of that. And then there's me who, mom drove me to the station when I get home. I brought my homemade quilt that I thought was so wonderful and special, and I was so embarrassed of because it was a lot of fun. It's when I was introduced into alcohol and drugs and
so really none of that was in your life in high school. You were just conquering the world, as all the things of being the team captain, all the deals that you were going through. You didn't focus on anything else until you get to college. Yeah. So the blinders come off, Myra. You start enjoying yourself. You're seeing all the things that you haven't experienced. How was all that?
Interesting. A lot of I'm just saying to myself, it is best. And I started for college when being an addicted person. I now can't do it. And I say a lot. I was an addicted person. I have the.
You recognize that?
I did. I cigarette. I never smoked. Never smoked. I have not. Never tried a drug. Yet I got addicted to opioids and ended up in federal prison because of it.
So you knew.
I call myself a snotty addict.
Right. And it's funny. I've talked to a lot of people that
I'm going to take prescription drugs. I'm a snotty addict.
I've talked to a lot of people that have that feeling, that are have been addicted. And I forget who it was. It was one of the episodes where he said, "Oh, I never he said, they said I was into meth. He said, I was never into meth. That's not, he's a cocaine. It's like, oh, well, okay. All right. So Myra, did you think in that time period, what drew you to the medical world?
My grandmother, Agatha Boyce Cummings, we called her Gaddy. She was a nurse growing up, and she was the one human being that I probably respected the most in this world. Even through college, she used to send me $2 for an ice cream cone, but you'd think it was, the end of the world because it was wrapped in tape, all wrapped in tape like this, all wrapped in tape like this for the $2.
Funny.
I still wish I'd kept one. But I loved Gaddy, and she was such an amazing nurse, and she always talked about Dr. Bonanno. Of course, I didn't realize it when I was little, but that's obviously her crush was Dr. Bonanno. And all the stories about Dr. Bonanno, I wanted to be that person that she could look up to the way she looked up to him. Like just the admiration in her voice and, the strength that he gave her and how he lifted her up. As a nurse in those days, she had a lot of power. She was she was the number one nurse in New York City. Like she taught all the other nurses. She was an incredible
kind of a pioneer
driver of women. She absolutely was. And I wanted to be the person that she admired.
That's interesting. So that all makes sense.
Yeah.
So how does you get into med school? Was it like you thought it would be, or was it, because I always wonder, because people have these ideas about med school, like how do they get through it? How did you get through med school?
Well, let me back up just a little bit because it's Myra. I never go the straight and narrow path. I didn't go straight from undergrad to med school.
Sure.
That's way too easy.
Right.
No, that's not me.
Right.
So in undergrad, I ended up getting cancer. It was called clear cell carcinoma from a drug my mother took when she was pregnant with me.
What year?
DES.
What time period in college was that?
19.
Junior
it was
year.
my junior year.
So you were right in the middle of college.
Right in the middle of
it. A lot to deal with.
And so I had to leave for surgery. So if you're pre-med, you have to take like a year of physics and a year of chemistry and a year of organic chemistry. And it ruined that rhythm. So when I went back, I kind of felt defeated and I stopped pre-med and I added education. My mother was a teacher. My sister was a teacher. I'm like, I'll be a good teacher. It'll be fine. And I was a phenomenal teacher. So I ended up graduating, and then I did my student teaching for the semester I missed. So I did my student teaching. I got hired where I student taught, had the most phenomenal master teacher in the world, still one of my most dearest, precious friends, and loved it. And I'm like, oh, this is meant to be. Had an amazing school. We were near Fort Drum, New York, and we got money for they didn't have a DoD school, so we got money for all of the military students. So it was an extremely wealthy school. So, as a teacher in the 90s, I had a laptop for every student. I made them do PowerPoint presentations. I mean, we were very, very fortunate. But again, had to be the rebel. I didn't like the Regents program they had in New York, which is a mandated state exam. So I wrote a variance to the biology Regents. So biology could be taught the way.
Of course, the Myra way.
Don't do it easy. So yeah, we wrote a 700-page variance and we got it approved by the state. And we taught biology the way it should be taught, hands-on, really learning. It was great. But after that, I felt like the cancer beat me. And I decided to try to go. So
was it always in the back of your head, Myra, that you were thinking, I didn't get that completed? You left it undone? It sounded like you liked it. You sounded like you liked the teaching. Yeah.
I loved it. And honestly, I think if I had stayed a teacher, I probably wouldn't have gotten in trouble. But I felt like the cancer beat me. And this is where my arrogance and ego comes in. I felt like I maxed out. Like I did everything I could do as a teacher. I got my master's while I was teaching. So I would teach from 7 in the morning till 3, drive an hour, go to school from 4 to 10. Drive an hour and a half home. And I did that in a year and got my master's in a year while teaching. So I had my master's, I'd written the variants. I didn't want to be like a principal. I didn't want to go the administrative route. So where else could I
Mm-hmm.
go as a teacher? And that's when I started to think, there needs to be something more for me. I need to go back into medicine. I'm not going to
Mm.
let the cancer beat me.
And that doesn't surprise me that you were, I mean, your whole life had been getting and achieving, getting and achieving, getting and achieving. So you go, you have this in your mind. Cancer, I'm not going to let it beat me. And how difficult was for you to make that transition from basically being an accomplished teacher with a master's and then going back to school?
I loved it. I'm a geek. I'm an absolute geek. I really loved it, but I was scared I would fail. To be honest, I had never studied a day in my life. I'd never
Mm-hmm.
had to. As long as I went to class, I just retained it. And when I first went to med school, I had to study, and I didn't know how to study. No one had ever taught me. I had never needed to. And I failed the first class of my
Wow.
entire life. It was humbling. It was very humbling. My first year, I didn't quit my teaching job. I took a year leave of absence because I was that afraid I would fail.
Wow. So did it?
And of course, being me, I left a year of lesson plans.
Of course
That's
you
how I
did.
roll.
I can't even imagine what that means. My youngest daughter, when she takes off like for 2 or 3 days, she said it's so painful because she's got to do all the lesson planning, and
It was six
oh, good
three-ring
Lord.
binders, complete with a drawer of bulletin boards. Yeah, when I met my replacement, she's like, "Oh, so you're the infamous
Mm-hmm.
Mrs. Mabry." Sorry.
So Myra, was there anything else eventful that happened in med school, or did you had that event, you flunked that first class, and then you figured it out?
Yeah, I figured it out. And of course, it wasn't enough. I had a vision. I wanted to be a family practitioner and have a group practice with a pediatrician and psych and daycare. I had this vision. So, but I didn't know I didn't know anything about business. So I did my MBA simultaneously in
Okay.
medical school.
Of course you did.
So, because medical school is
No, you might
not
as well
hard
do an
enough.
MBA along the
You know,
side.
I get a challenge, right? So our tests were on Mondays, and then I took my MBA classes on Monday night. So I ended up doing that. And I'm an osteopath. I don't know if you're familiar with DOs versus MDs. They both have all the same privileges in the United States, but osteopaths in the good old days philosophically believed that the body has the ability
Mm-hmm.
to heal itself. So I only applied to osteopathic schools because I truly do believe that. And they use hands-on manipulation to help the body to
Mm-hmm.
help itself. So I did, of course, I did an extra year fellowship in that to be able to treat people. I know it sounds like so much. Saying it all at once is a lot. So I did an extra year, which paid for 3 years of
Okay.
my schooling. But it gave me extra time to learn and to be proficient in the manipulation that osteopaths do.
So, I mean, that's so much. I mean, what you just said, what you just did up until that point in your life, I mean, that's like for 3 or 4 people.
It is a lot. It didn't seem that way. I was very blessed with a
Uh-huh.
beautiful brain. I was blessed with challenges growing up that gave me resiliency. I got married young. I got married at 21 to an amazing man who was extremely supportive. Absent a lot because he was military. We were married 30 years. We spent 7 of that together. The rest of it, he was
What
deployed
was
or in
that like?
school. Um, it's all I knew. So it seemed normal to me. But looking back, it was horrifying. You know, I, when I packed up for prison, I found some of the VHS tapes of the recordings when they
Mm.
invaded Haiti. He was one of the first people who invaded Haiti, and I was afraid he was going to die. So I recorded the news every single night in case I could see it. I'm going to cry.
Mm.
That fear is overwhelming.
I think it would be similar as to someone, that's being deployed and they're in a military environment where anything can happen. It's like a police officer, that's walking the beat. They go and you don't know if they're coming back.
Absolutely. And, we got married in 1990. So there were no cell phones. There really wasn't mass email. So he would call, and if I wasn't home, it was an
Mm,
answering machine. If I went to go groceries and came back and it was an answering machine. He stood in line 2, 3 hours for a 10-minute phone call that literally, just like in prison, 10
yeah,
minutes and 1 second, it
right.
hangs up on you. It was awful. As we got along in years, eventually they have cell phones and satellite phones and you can talk to them at any time. But that's not
Mm-mm.
how it was in the beginning. It was letters, lots and lots and lots of letters, and very, very few phone
So while
calls.
he's,
But again, it
well,
prepared
I'm
me for
sure it
prison,
did. I mean,
ironically.
for a lot of different levels of that. So he's in and out of your life. You are now in the world of becoming a doctor. How did that work for you? Like when you get out of med school, um, I know there's the residency and there's all those different things that happen. How did that work for you? Like, where did you stay around your area? Did you have to travel? How did that go?
So we lived in military housing at the time on Long Island. And luckily, there's lots of hospitals in Long Island. So I was able to stay in that area and do all of my
Okay.
rotations and everything within, a within travel distance. Some people have to like literally move to do rotations and things like that. I didn't have to because I was in a
So that
metropolitan
was
area.
good.
And it gave me something to do while he was gone. So I
Yeah.
didn't focus on it. And of course, I became the family support group leader. So I was in charge of all the wives while the husbands were gone, because that's just how I roll.
But I can see how all that also eats up that, that stress that surrounds you. You're also able to kind of get that out if you're creating into this environment where you can talk to people about what everybody else is experiencing, which makes sense.
Right. If I had taken advantage of that, it may have helped me, but I didn't allow that to happen. I put on that mask of
Hmm.
everything's perfect. Everything's perfect. I can help you.
It's like
Everything's
Instagram.
perfect. I'm here to support you. My life was Instagram.
The
My life
best
was
dinner,
social media.
the best vacation, the best outing. Yes. The best
The,
life.
the best life. Absolutely. I was that person. I had no problems, no struggles. And if they were a struggle, it was just to prove that I could handle it. That's really the image I put out there, but not only put out there, it's what I told myself. So I never let myself take a breath. It was like I was holding my breath that entire time and just adding one mask onto another, onto another, onto another. You can handle it. You can handle it. Looking back, I really didn't. I had one emotion. One emotion. I was just happy all the time. Happy and
That's a
together
lot.
all the time.
That's a lot to be that all the time. That's
You
on
know,
all the time.
yeah, my friends and family remind me, every once in a while you'd have a breakdown and cry and da 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 da, but then the
Hmm.
next day you go right back.
Yeah. So you get into the world that you're living. You become a doctor, OB-GYN. Um, I'm assuming that how long does this world happen before you enter into your nightmare?
So the nightmare started in medical school, actually. I had migraine headaches severely to the point where people thought I probably
Mm,
shouldn't go to med school. And we were an osteopathic school, so I would get treatments, and it really did help. The osteopathic treatments helped a great deal. But then for breakthrough, I was prescribed opioids. And then when I started residency, OB-GYN residency, your first year is you run labor and delivery. You have to learn how to handle any labor emergency, and you don't leave the floor. And I practiced in the good old days when the rules weren't
hmm.
really enforced. So you could stay up for 36
Right.
hours and
Just
work
didn't
that
matter.
long. And nowadays that doesn't happen,
Hmm.
but in my day it did. And like if I had a migraine, they would literally send me to the emergency room. I would get IV morphine, Valium, and Reglan, sleep for an hour, and go straight back to the
Wow,
floor.
Myra.
I would get a prescription for 120 Vicodin at a time.
Did you feel like that you were getting addicted, or like, because you knew that it was a medicinal, but did you feel like that the addiction was there?
So again, I think this is part of the arrogance of medicine is that, well, I can handle it because I'm a doctor.
Right.
Like, I know the risks. I know the side effects. I can handle it. And they're my doctors. Like, if they're prescribing it to me, it's fine. There's always that little knowing deep down inside that you know it's wrong, but it's so easy to ignore when everyone around you is telling you something different. And you have no other way to cope.
Yeah.
So I had one taste of it. We had a vacation house in the Poconos, and we went for a weekend, and I didn't bring my opioids. And I went through very slight withdrawals. Like I was just like irritable. And I was like, oh, I think that's a withdrawal. It's okay, so home, I'll
Uh-huh.
just take some, it'll be fine.
So you had a feel. You were working, you were functioning, you were
Looking back,
functioning through it.
they say there is no such thing as a functioning addict.
Mm-hmm.
I beg to differ because, I was functioning at the highest level. I was, right before I got arrested, I was the chief of the department. I was the medical director of family planning.
I know. I remember you telling me
I was
all
at the
that when
top
we
of
talked
my
on the phone.
game.
I mean, you had risen to prominence some people are just doctors, but you actually got into the upper echelon of whatever you can do in that world. And again, seems like that's a lot, to have on your shoulders that you're carrying. Did you, as this all happened, kind of walk us through that time period where things got crazy?
Yeah, we'll skip some of the fun stories. So I, as a stress relief, and I hope I
You
can
say
say this
anything
on
on
your
this show.
show.
This is not your success.
So I had an affair to deal with part of the stress, and the affair was with a woman, a nurse, just because we like to
Why
mix it
not?
up a little just to make it fun. And I'd had 5 surgeries in 5 years. One of them was total knee reconstruction, and after that, I got a clot in my leg that ended up traveling to my lungs. And I was treated at my hospital. They didn't believe me that I had the clot. And then when it traveled to my lungs, they didn't believe me. They said I was just anxious and gave me Benadryl. And then the next morning, when they found out I had pulmonary embolism, I was rushed to the ICU. But it was all because of this knee. And I kept saying, it's not okay. It's not okay. It's not okay. And a year and a half. And so I just started writing myself prescriptions. And that, because I just was so frustrated with the medical field that I was angry, and the
How
down spiral of
ironic is
addiction
that,
started to
though,
happen.
that
Like,
you are in the medical field? You're telling them what's wrong with you, and you don't feel like you're getting the treatment that you should be getting as the patient.
I was his wife's OB-GYN. I let him deliver his own baby
Wow.
hands over hands. And he didn't believe me when I told him that I was
Wow.
having a baby.
Wow.
Yeah,
That's something.
it's a lot. Actually, my criminal lawyer said, I really can't help you with your criminal case. You kind of screwed yourself. But I wish you'd come to me when you had that PE, because that was medical malpractice. I really could have helped you back then.
Right. Right.
Yeah, because that was real. That was real. So I started writing prescriptions to myself, and then it started. I would write one for my nurse, and then she'd give them to me, and then she would write one, and then we started playing back and forth, and then I just started to get bold and writing them under family members' names, getting my family involved, because that's what addicts do. Because my family will never turn me in.
Because I don't know, Myra.
Thoughts.
Can a doctor write a prescription to themselves?
Legally, yes.
Okay.
Ethically, no. So I never wrote one for myself. I wrote one for my girlfriend. I wrote for friends. I wrote for family. Of course, they didn't
Did your
know.
husband have any idea that any of the stuff that you just talked about was going on? Nobody did.
Nobody did.
You were living two different lives.
My
two
sister
lives.
will claim. Yeah, my sister will claim that she knew, but if she did, she never said anything. But no, nobody knew. People started to realize that I started to have emotional outbursts.
At work or just in general?
As I think in general. and that I wasn't coping as well as I did, but everyone thought it was the stress. I
Which would
had
make
so much on my
sense.
plate. Absolutely. And I was able to rationalize it. And also I was able to, this sounds so terrible and it's awful, but this was addiction. And this, which is a part of me, I would power people and I would say, well, you don't understand. You're not in the position I'm in. I have people's lives under my hands. You don't understand how hard that is. I save lives. I bring lives into this world. That was my way of pushing people away, shutting them off, which is a thinking error cutoff, cutting them off so that they couldn't. Exactly.
For those down in the Cayman Islands listening, RDAP is a residential drug addiction program that you can get your off in prison. And both Myra and I were in that program. And there's a lot of different steps that they talk about. Sometimes when they come up, you recognize them because you just pushed one out there.
Oh, I used every single one of them. Let me tell you, I used every one, but it allowed me to keep people at a distance so they couldn't see what I was doing. So they couldn't ask questions.
I get that,
I wouldn't
Myra,
let them.
but here's what I'm wondering, because you were living two separate worlds basically and crossing over daily in those worlds. Did any of that worry, scare, that when you got into this prescription thing, did you think, well, I don't know if I should be, well, that's okay. I mean, did you rationalize it out that it's going to be okay, or did it scare you that I've stepped over into no man's land? Both.
I think there's always that knowing that you're doing wrong. Know when you're doing wrong. I just wouldn't let myself look at it. I was very good at putting my head in the sand. Even during my criminal case, I put my head in the sand. I actually went back and read my PSR for the first time ever before this podcast. I had never read it. I
wouldn't do that if I was you, but
I had never read it. My head was in the sand a lot, and it was in the sand a lot with my addiction as well. So I knew, I'd be lying to say I didn't know. Every time I went to pick up a prescription, my heart was pounding. I was sitting in the car. I was so nervous. And while I was chit-chatting and all nervous and playing the power card and making up elaborate lies. And then once I got in the car, I'm like, nothing to worry about. You're no one's going to question
you. Were you worried?
And you would just go on to the next
the other question I was thinking, Myra, about that is you knew it was wrong. You had an adrenaline rush every time this happened. The other person that was in this with you, the nurse, the person you were having an affair with, did that get entangled to where you thought, what if she says something? What if she does something? And then I'm part of all this.
Oh, absolutely. That was a very toxic relationship, very manipulative. Of course, I was using her. She was using me. I was supporting her financially. She was supporting me in drugs, a very ugly, terrible situation. And there's threats back and forth, and she's like, well, if you don't do this, I'm going to call your medical director. I'm going to call, the OIG and turn you in.
And she would, that would be a real fear. I mean, she didn't have nearly as much to lose as you did in that relationship.
Exactly.
So did you feel like when all this was happening, as towards the end of this happening, did you think that things could end up really dark like they did? Or did you just think, you know what, I'm going to get done with this and move on and won't do this anymore? Or were you so deep into it that if you didn't even think about the idea of getting caught?
I thought about the idea of getting caught, but again, I was just like, I have so many people fooled, including myself. And again, who's going to look at me? I am successful. I am in so many high-powered positions. I was the face of my hospital. I was on billboards everywhere. Like, who's going to look at me? No one's going to question what I do.
Almost intoxicating how much you had accomplished.
It really is. And that level of, I have no humility. If you had asked me that, I would have said, of course I'm humble. I take care of humans. I'm the most humble person ever. Ooh, humble, but not humans.
When did you start getting a feeling, or did you ever get a feeling that they were looking at you? Did you ever have that,
Um,
like, over your shoulder, looking over your shoulder, that there's something going on?
I caught my nurse in a
Okay.
couple lies, and I and of course pressing her was difficult because I was always afraid that she
Right.
was going to turn me in. So it was this like really delicate balance. But I caught her like writing a few prescriptions because she knew all my passwords and
Mm-hmm.
everything is online. And when I questioned her about it, she of course then threatened me. So
Mm-hmm.
I stopped questioning. And lo and behold, when I finally did get arrested, she had written thousands
Wow.
of prescriptions. And oh, yes, remember I looked it up? So they do conversions of prescriptions into kilograms. Do you want
I
to just
can't
guess how many I
even, in
had?
my wildest thoughts, kilograms plus it's, wow.
683.
Yeah, that's a lot.
So they basically thought I was a kingpin drug
Mm-hmm.
dealer selling. So it was a very long, ugly investigation because they didn't think that anyone could have prescribed that many opioids and
Yeah.
taken them themselves. My girlfriend did start selling and she did start using heroin. So I don't know what percent was me and what percent was her, but
Was it?
regardless, that's a lot. Like, you know that the federal system works
Mm-hmm.
on a point system. So I
Yeah,
had 30
that's
points,
a lot. Yeah.
which is
Yeah.
it's just kingpin status.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, I had 27 alone, and then I got extra for being in a position of authority because I was the leader
Yeah.
of the two of us. I was the doctor, she was the nurse. And I got extra points. I got points for having no connection to society because
Mm.
I had no children, which was very heart wrenching because I wanted children and couldn't have them. And I got points for my degrees because it's a
Mm.
position of authority. So all the
That you'd
things in my
worked on.
life that I was proud of, yes, actually hurt me in the prison system, which I found
No,
so interesting.
it's crazy how that, what you just said is true. Um, was it, when they came for you, did it, was it a knock on the door, or was it a call from your attorney? How did
It
it
was
come to you?
it was it was a
Okay.
sit down at work, like, where are all these coming from? And I made up a great big huge lie. And then in walked the
Mm.
DEA agents and said, "You're
What was
lying."
going through your mind then? Yeah. Yeah.
Um, yeah. And my first instinct, because I had
Yeah.
lied for so long about the drugs, about the affair, about other things in my life that we don't even have time to get into today. I had just lied for so long. I started to
Sure.
believe my own lies. And I'd gotten away with it for so long, it was just my automatic go to. And my first sponsor said to me, she's like, "You're being as honest as you can be." I got so mad. But then over time, I was like, I really was. I wasn't ready to be really honest and to really look at what I had done and the impact and the people that I hurt. I wasn't. I wasn't being as honest. I wasn't being 100% honest. It was only as I could be at that point,
Mm.
at that stage. So my first instinct was to lie. And I did try to do that. I tried to lie. And that's why I got obstruction of justice on top of it.
Wow. Because
My first
yeah, because
instinct was
that
to
has
lie.
been how you had coped and gotten through for all those years.
Absolutely. Yep.
So I'm trying to think on this time frame, because there's a lot of people that would have fought it, when the DEA thing happened. You're with your husband, and I'm thinking, right? Still, okay. So
Hmm.
did
Yep.
this all come as a total shock to him? Yeah.
Yes. Everybody. So, like you said at the beginning, everyone found out in one day that I was having an affair with a woman. I was addicted to opioids. I was writing illegal prescription. I was
Mm.
losing my job and going to prison
That's a
all
lot.
in one day.
That's what I was saying, is like a Netflix series that you binge on the weekend. There's a lot to unpack there. There's a
Oh,
lot to
absolutely.
unpack there. All right, Myra, I want to unpack the rest of this. Before we do, I want to recognize the White Collar Support Group. Nightmare Success Podcast is sponsored by the White Collar Support Group. It's the world's first support group devoted to people navigating the white-collar criminal justice system. I'm a member of the white-collar support group, and I can tell you that this is a bunch of people who help each other through the criminal justice journey for free. For free. Whether you're just starting your journey or you've been through and made it to the other side, this is a great space for you. Come join us on Zoom, Mondays, 7 p.m. Eastern Time, 4 p.m. Pacific. For information, go to prisonist.org. That's prisonist.org. Start here. Okay, Myra. So, yes.
I have to say one thing, Brent. I have to put a plug in
Please do.
for the white collar support group. If I had found that group before I went to prison, my life would have been very different. But I'm grateful I found them after, because my reentry, I struggled more in reentry than I have at any other point. So, I found them at my darkest, which is really important. And even when I get in dark times now, if I talk to somebody in that group, I feel
totally agree with you.
I know I'm not alone. It is amazing.
I've second everything you just said, and I wish I would have found them before I went in. But the fact that after the reentry part is something that, there's not a handbook for. And, finding people you can talk to where you think that you're not crazy is finding other crazy people to talk to. That makes, but then you don't feel crazy. But it's fantastic. And I'm so proud to have them as a sponsor on the show. All right, going back to Myra. How long does that happen from the DEA sitting down with you that day to you're looking at a judge and a plea deal and all that?
So the DEA was 2017. I finally got sentenced in March of 2020.
And let's go back a little bit. So when you do have that conversation with your family, with your husband, what is the reaction to Myra being what we didn't know Myra was?
A lot of, oh my God, what's going to happen? I'm so sorry. How can we help you? Why didn't you tell us? Why didn't you reach out to us? We knew something was wrong. We knew something was off, but you were unreachable. Yeah, they were like, you were unreachable. And like I said, I did everything I could to keep people at a distance, which is a very addict behavior, because you don't want to be caught. So if you keep people at a distance, you don't let them ask you, question you. So I pushed and pushed and pushed. And everyone was actually just relieved that it was out. They're like, okay, this sucks, but at least we know what we're dealing with now, because I hadn't realized, and I don't even think they had realized how frustrated they were and how much over time that they had lost the essence of Myra. So it was almost the biggest relief of my life.
You were relieved.
And so was my family, because finally they figured out what the world was wrong with me. And once you know what the problem is, you can start working on a solution.
Exactly.
So it was the biggest weight lifted in the world.
How crazy is that, Myra, that the worst rock bottom moment, you're relieved that you can start working on yourself from that point forward? Because I think this is very, very true for people who hit rock bottom. Because I remember my rock bottom moment like it was yesterday. Most people say that it's the end, but if you recognize the rock bottom moment, to survive it, it can be a new beginning. And those are so drastically different things that I just said, but it's so true. And some people never experience a rock bottom. So if you do experience a rock bottom and you see it as something that, okay, I can't get any lower, which way do I go? And you go the other way, being the new beginning of whatever that is, you're going to survive it.
Absolutely. There's a lot packaged in that. Someone said to me once, and it was someone in an AA meeting, they said, you hit your rock bottom when you stop digging.
I like that.
And that hit me so hard, because one, it gives you accountability. You created that hole. You dug that. And then you also have control over when you stop. Your bottom is when you stop. And like you said, some people don't experience it because some people don't dig the hole.
Right.
I started digging, and then when I got in trouble, instead of stopping digging, I dug more, and I dug tunnels sideways, and I tried to create a tunnel system underneath, and like I'll just dig more. I'll dig over here. They won't catch me over here.
But you do
Like,
kind of have to worry about the people that say they don't have problems, because I almost think you need to turn and run when somebody says that, because everybody's got something going on. And yeah,
I was perfect. I was
you were
perfect until I
everything.
fell. I, absolutely. I
Hmm.
succeeded at everything I did. And I did do and made wonderful impacts on people's lives, and I can say that now. My students and my patients wrote character reference letters for me for my sentencing. It was really beautiful.
I think we talked about this on the phone. There's something about that happens because it's such a dark period of time. But when you get those letters, that it's almost like you being at your funeral and not being dead. You get to hear what people think of you, and they're trying to help you. And I took those letters with me to prison because if I was at a dark time, I would get a letter out and read it, because you feel better. But there is nothing more meaningful than in getting those letters, because people have to take the time to do that. People only write letters, It's like, and to do that and to get as many as you got, and to the people that in the space of that where you got, it's even though you're going through the darkest moment, it's like, oh my gosh, that feels good.
It is funny how a lot of people justice impacted turn to the same methods to try to cope. I did the same thing. Of course, I couldn't self surrender, but I had my family
Mm-hmm.
send those letters in to me. And, in those dark moments, just to read them and remember that that's
Yes.
a part of you as well. Like that's still
Mm-hmm.
a part of you as well. And that was, and even during sentencing, when the judge read the name of 47 people wrote letters, my lawyer said, just have them stop. That's enough. But she read the name of every single person. And I was like,
That's
okay,
awesome.
that's love. That's love. That's love. That's forgiveness. That's
Mm-hmm.
grace. That's compassion. And I just kept saying
And
that
those
to
things that
myself,
you just said, those
because when
words,
they read the
yeah,
bad stuff,
you need to hear that: grace, compassion,
yeah,
forgiveness, love.
woo,
Well, let's talk about that.
yes.
I don't know how long of a period that was, but you went through that whole thing. You're in the courtroom. Um, did you have an idea, Myra, what they were going to give you?
Well, no, because their only offer was 9
That's a
years.
big swallow, gulp.
Um, and we said no, which is a
Real
really
ballsy
ballsy
to the
thing to
federal
do.
government, the USA. Oh,
So, yeah,
mm,
really ballsy with the federal government. So I walked into my sentencing. She did tell me that I wouldn't be allowed to self surrender. So I walked in knowing I was going to get cuffed and walked away.
that's
She did give
nice.
me that grace.
A lot of people don't. A lot of people just
So
don't
I
know.
walked in having, right. So I have to give her credit for that. Um, I had no idea. I was looking at 11 to 13 years. My only offer was 9 that I had rejected. My lawyers were hoping for 5. My husband, who's now my ex-husband, I still call him my husband though, because he's my best friend. He was set that it was going to be 4. He's just like, Myra, it's going to be 4. I just know it is. And ended up being 54 months.
Yep.
So 4.5 years.
So they handcuff you, they take you. How long do you go through that? Did you go through the whole transfer stuff in Oklahoma and all that good
Oh,
stuff? Shackling, and you
it
got to,
all.
yeah, the Myra's got to
Good
experience
stories.
everything.
And it's a chapter. So I ended up going to
Okay.
Albany County in New York, which is one of the top 10
I've
worst
heard of that one. Yep.
prisons in, yeah, everyone has heard of
Mm-hmm.
that one. It's horrible. It was scary and awful and dirty and skanky, and I
Mm.
was terrified. There were no words how scared I was. I was there for 3 days, and then I got transferred down to MDC in Brooklyn, Metropolitan Detention Center in Brooklyn, which is a pre-trial facility. But there's no federal prison in upstate New York. So they use MDC as a place to hold you in a federal facility until you can do the transfer to Oklahoma City and then go to your
Mm.
final destination. which we call my deployment. And
Yeah.
we either called it my paid
Your
vacation
deployment.
or my deployment. Well, it was interesting. Elvis said, he's like, I finally understand what I put you through all those years. He's like, because you're in a very scary place. I don't know what's happening. I can't reach you. I can't call you. I just have to wait for you to reach out to me for a phone call or an email or a letter. I have no idea what's happening. I can't help you. He's like, I finally understand what I put you through in all those years.
So you experience all that, and you finally end up where?
So NDC on March 11th, 2020.
Yeah.
And if that rings a bell,
when the world starts shutting down.
Yes. March 13th was the federal shutdown. So I got stuck at MDC in Brooklyn for a year. Didn't see the light of day for a year. It's a box within a box. It was a very long time. And it's interesting, one of the things I really learned, I learned a lot through this process, but one of them is it's always going to be okay. Like I had told myself, they told me I was going to go to a camp. I'm like, as long as I go to a camp, I can be outside, I can have my family, I'll be fine. I'll be okay. That didn't happen. Then I'm like, well, as long as my family can visit me, I'll be okay. Then the shutdown. Well, as long as I can walk, I'll be okay. And then they shut down the gym. Well, as long as I can do videos, the VHS videos, I'll be okay. Well, then for quarantine, I was quarantined in the SHU for 2 months before I went to Oklahoma City. And finally, I looked at myself and I said, you know what? No matter what my circumstances, I'm still going to be okay. Because I have all of these contingencies, like if this, then that. And I realized, no, it's just okay. Such a big
thing, life lesson though, is that you can adapt to almost anything. I mean, you never want somebody to have to go through that, but it's crazy what you can adapt to.
Absolutely. And, when I was in the SHU, it was 13 steps around and I was walking an hour a day. I would do 15,000 laps at 13 steps. I did calisthenics, I did burpees. I'm like, I lost 120 pounds in prison. Like I was determined.
Of course you did.
Of course, we got to do something great, right?
Think about that.
Gotta do something great.
That's right. 13 steps.
Just 13 steps. A little jig on the AA 12 steps.
One more.
But, it's 13 steps. Absolutely, because there's always one more.
So I think the thing too that's kind of fascinating about your journey through all that is once you got to where you were supposed to be, it had to be like so much of like almost like you had been released in a sense.
So we went from MDC Brooklyn, which is where GYN Maxwell was, by the way. I got to see her.
But you said I don't want to go over that. Like you or disregard the way that. So you were there with her, but you said that she had like her own like area.
Right. She was, and so the women, they built a new facility for the men. The women got the old one. So they rigged the floors. It was like a dorm-like setting. It was all open dorms. So we had a dorm.
Had she already been sentenced?
No,
okay, she was just being held.
She just came in.
Okay.
Yeah, she came pre-trial. There was 64.
We're talking about Jolene Maxwell, by the way.
In our dorm.
I didn't hear that on the beginning. Yeah.
Yeah, GYN Maxwell, so she had that entire space to herself on another floor. So the exercise rooms have cages on the walls, so you could see through our cage to her cage. And once they realized we could do that, they blackened it out so we couldn't. But there was a couple weeks where we could see her like doing laps, but she had that entire space where we had 64 bunk beds. So, 128 women.
Wow.
One. It was her.
That's incredible. I mean, prisoners don't get that kind of space anywhere.
No. And she had 3 FBI agents
Because
every
they
day
didn't want
around
the
the clock
Jeffrey
party.
Epstein thing to happen again.
Exactly. On top of the COs. Yeah.
That's
Yep.
interesting. So
It was.
Myra, when you get to the place where you're supposed to be finally a year later, what is your mindset in going into that?
I had a lot of anxiety because, of course, all I could think of is RDAP, RDAP, RDAP. I need my year. I need to get in, you know, and so I did NRDAP, the non-residential version, while I was in Brooklyn. So I had already been approved, which is like the biggest part. It's like getting approved is the biggest part. So I was very grateful that I was on the list. So I just needed to get to Alderson. So finally, after 2 months in the shoe, of course, Oklahoma, I got to go, you know, I got to fly Con Air.
Never heard anything good about any of that. It's never good to travel as a prisoner, but to go Con Air to Oklahoma, get transported out, there's nothing that ever ends up good about those stories.
No. But I got to go. So then I got to spend, what did I spend? 3 weeks maybe in Oklahoma City. And then finally got to Alderson. And I got quarantined there because it's still COVID. So I had 64 days where I was still inside, but I could see the grass. I could see the trees. I could see the clouds. I could hear the birds. We got rec time when no one else was outside. We were allowed to go. Oh, I literally fell to the ground and kissed the earth. Like, and I'm such an earthbound person. Like, I grew up on a farm. I've always been a gardener. Like, if I'm going to rejuvenate, it's in the earth. It's hiking, you know, it's kayaking, horseback riding. It's so to be stuck in cement for so long. I felt free there. Like, I was like, I could be outside. I could sit on a picnic table. It was a big change.
How'd you do your time there? Did you have a good prison job? Did you have people that you kind of got to know?
So it was, of course, COVID. So everything was limited.
I've always thought, I got,
locked down a lot.
I went to prison and got out at the very end of 2016. So but I often thought about it. It's strange, like when you get out of prison and I would see like all the things that we were doing to lock down people on the outside. I was thinking, this has to be the very worst time ever that you could be in prison, because any privilege that you would have that a prisoner feels like that they have, and they take that away, whether it be visiting rights or walking the yard or working out or just anything like that. And then they take that away. That really feels like you're, I don't know. I don't even know the word for that, but it has to be the very worst time that somebody could go to prison.
You're like imprisoned within the prison. So so basically all the jobs were gone. I did do cottage maintenance because that one was still there. When I was in Brooklyn, I taught the GED. So that was good because I felt like I was helping people, and, they kind of protected me because, you get little things like paper and pens and erasers and like things that people want.
And you were a teacher,
so that's kind of how
by trade, that's what you were good at.
That was really good. And they got gummies and candies and, so they got treats. So, and they would just give me a pile of them, and then I could give out rewards. So that's how I got through MDC. But Alderson, all of those jobs were gone. Like, everything was shut down. I mean, there was no gym, there was no church. We were filed into the cafeteria, and we picked up a styrofoam tray, and then we were filed back, and it was one unit at a time. And some days you got 45 minutes outside, but if there weren't enough COs, if they weren't in the mood, if it was bad weather, you didn't even get. So you're just locked in with 120 women. And my RDAP was extremely strict, and lots of pettiness and manipulation and, trying to get other people in trouble. And it's like a little cult. So it is a cult. It's absolutely a cult. That's such a good way to describe it. But I was just determined to make the best of it. They made us individualized lesson plans, and mine was 13 pages long. They wanted me to read 50 books, right? Like I had, which was great for me.
It ate up your time. Gave you a task. I'm going to conquer this. Just give Myra something to do. She can be the best at it. Just give her something.
And I did. And I ended up, like I told you, I lost 120 pounds. I ended up teaching HIIT classes and power yoga. And, we got up at 6 o'clock in the morning. We worked out from 6 to 7. And then we had an hour. We programmed from 8 to 4. So it was good. And then I walked an hour at night, did my homework the next day. So we were busy. It went fast.
So Myra, at that time, I can't remember from our conversation before was the CARES Act something that people started talking about, that there were possibilities that could occur for people getting out?
Oh, there was talk about everything. There was the First Step Act, CARES Act. There was so much talk and so little knowledge. And one person would say one thing and then try to keep it private, and then someone else would find out. And like the anxiety around that, there are no words to describe it. Like, because you didn't know. You had no way to find out. There was no access to real information. And of course, the CO's not going to tell. Like, you don't know. And my lawyers abandoned me as soon as I got sentenced. Like, they wouldn't even answer my phone calls. So yeah, that was extremely anxiety ridden, because you're like, I should be able to get out on CARES Act. And we filed all of these motions and they were all denied. And then the First Step Act came out, and how many points do you have and how much time? And everyone's like, one person would get called to the office and you'd be like, did you find out your FSA? Did you not? Are you getting out? Are you? And then there were immediate release days, and people thought they should get out, and other people are just like, pack your stuff, go.
I can't imagine that's all that unknown and that
it was
world.
Mayhem. It was the angst. The angst. That's the only word. It was constant, daily angst.
When you started getting close to knowing that you were getting close to the door to getting out, what were your thoughts? Thinking, I'm going to leave here.
So funny. I thought I could conquer the world.
Of course you did, Myra.
I did my time. I did my time. I read. I'm all good. I actually talked about things in therapy and RDAP that I had never shared with another human being. It was a very good program. It was really good for me. And I felt like that, as honest as you can, I felt like I finally got there. I got to the root cause. And I was ready to conquer the world. And then I got out. And it was really hard. I have found reentry to be the hardest thing. And I'm trying to tell myself it's just a process. Like in education, so in medical school, you do 4 years of undergrad, and then you go to medical school, you're a senior in undergrad, you're the top of the world, and then you go to medical school and you're at the bottom. And then you spend 2 years learning and then you're top of the game, and then you go into rotations and you're at the bottom. Then you do 2 years of rotation and you graduate, you're at the top of your world, you're starting residency, back at the bottom. And then you build yourself up again. So, I'm used to that roller coaster, and I'm trying to tell myself right now that, I was top of my world, bottom again when I got sentenced. I made it through MDC, which I'm really proud of myself for. Then you go to a different prison, and you know what it's like in a new prison. You're the bottom again. Yeah. So the bottom again, and then you get into the RDAP program, so you're kind of on the top again. And then you start to have a little confidence, and your shame is diminishing, your self-worth is increasing, you feel like you've paid back your debt to society, you're mending things with your family, things are good, and then reentry, back.
So what do you think's been the hardest in like reentry? Because it's interesting how it affects people.
I'm not sure I can pick one thing. Not being able to utilize my skill set is extremely frustrating. I think it's just such a waste of skill and education. And this isn't arrogance. I was an incredible teacher. I was so passionate. I loved my kids. I was an incredible physician. I worked so hard and cared so deeply. And I can't use those gifts anymore. And I realize that a lot of the things that got me there, I can still use, but I haven't found that yet. I did get my coaching certification, and a lot of people
I
think I'd be
think
an
you would
amazing
be, we
life and
talked about that. I think
wellness
you'd be
coach.
awesome. And I think, somebody like you should be allowed to teach regardless of what it is. Um, I
I
understand that. I'm
can't.
just saying there shouldn't be a barrier to that because you have so much to offer. But I do think the life coaching thing, being someone who has experienced what you've experienced, accomplished what you've accomplished, and have that empathy factor of understanding where somebody is, uh, could be so impactful for someone. Because the reason I was so drawn to your story and you, Myra, is that you have so much life, and it is a
Mm.
process. And I think the thing about the reentry thing is that um, when you go through this nightmare, you think being released, it's over, and it's not.
Yes.
It's another layer of how you live the rest of your life because you're always branded as the ex-felon. You're a justice impacted person, which is what they say now, but it's something that it becomes part of you, that's something now that you carry. But one thing I know about you is you'll figure that out because you figured out all the other steps that you've done all your life. So you're right. You do go from freshman to senior, freshman to senior, freshman to senior. And it's a crazy, crazy thing.
And I'm a
But I
freshman
love
again.
the idea of you coaching because, in effect, that's really what a good teacher is, right? The teacher is
And a
yeah,
good doctor.
yeah,
Absolutely. You're teaching people how to be their
yeah.
best version of themselves.
And the other thing I love
That's what it
too,
is.
Myra, is that you went through all this and you you threw all that out there, and your people said, "I just want to help. I want to help. I want to help, Myra. We knew we needed to help you. We didn't know how to help you. Now that so you have all that, and I can only see things that are going to be good things for you to be able to step up because you are that type of person. You don't. The one thing about this is unless you let it break you and you become a victim and get up in a fetal position, as long as you continue to be you, you will conquer, figure out, and overcome because you're just wired that way. It's in your DNA, which is it's a good thing. It's a good thing.
Those are very kind words. I'm just starting to figure out why I'm struggling. I think previously I was very
Yeah.
externally motivated. I wanted to make other people happy. I wanted to prove
Yeah.
myself, my worth. Um, and that was all externally driven. Now, and my jobs were very well defined. You have to do A, B, and C to be a teacher. You have to do
Right.
A, B, and C to be a
You like
doctor.
that?
I'm very good at those things. I was actually very
Sure.
good in prison because
Right.
tell me what to do and I'll do it. I got frustrated in prison when they
I
changed the
got these
rules. Don't
down.
change the rules on me. You tell me what they are and stick to it.
I've
So
got these down. I'm good at
I'm
these.
very good at that. Um, now I
I
have to
saw
do it for
something the
me.
other day that was on I think it was on Twitter, well X now. And it was a guy that was going around and he was interviewing people that were 75 to 95 years old. And he was talking about things that were important to them now, what they would say to themselves as a younger,
Mm.
the very interesting questions, but the answers that they got back, the number one thing that they continued to say, all of them, the 95-year-old, the 75-year-old, they ran so fast and so furious towards material things and money. And as they're older, they know you have to have some to survive, but it's relationships, it's social, it's doing things and being around things that make you happy. And I was thinking, that's because they're getting towards the end and they know what's important. And it was so interesting that I think he interviewed 8 people, all different ages from 75, 95, but all of them put out number one is they felt like they wasted a good amount of their time chasing things that they don't think are important anymore, mostly money. And I think that's interesting because people at the end of their life do grab on to the things that are the most important. And they talked about relationships, family, love, and passions. And didn't matter what the age you were.
But I guess I can only speak for myself, but I feel like prison
Yeah.
gives you that gift early. because you don't have
Humbling.
anything. It's gone.
Very
Like
humbling.
I lost everything. I lost my career. I lost my house. I lost my vacation home.
I
I
always
lost
say you
my
don't have to worry
retirement.
about that anymore.
I lost it.
You don't have to worry. You don't have to worry about
Exactly. Like
losing that.
gone.
Take that stress level off.
Like the things are just gone. They're just gone. Don't worry about them anymore. It's just a locker that's what, 4 feet
That's
by
right.
18 inches.
And a locker
That's
and a
where my
chair.
stuff is. Like that's how much. Like that's how much I have. So
Yeah,
isn't
it
that a
is.
gift? Like I find that we'll go shopping, and I ended up moving back in with my ex-husband, who is my absolute best friend. I'm #1 cheerleader in the world. And he'll go shopping, and he's like, "Do you need anything?" And I'm like, "Well, don't you want anything?" And I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, "And really, gone are the, I want this. I need not want. I need this for the house. I need to buy this."
Right.
No, no. So I think it helps you to realize it is the people, and for me, the
Yep.
animals, the earth, like those,
Yeah.
relationships, connectedness. Those are the things
Mm-hmm.
that got me
That's what
through
you
it, and those
value.
are the
Yeah.
things that really matter.
I get. I so agree with that.
And we
Early
got that
on.
gift early. We didn't have to be
That's
towards the
right.
end of our life to do it. We got that
Myra,
gift
I'm right with
early.
you 100%.
It's so funny when you talked about labels earlier. I was a doctor and now I'm a felon, and society labels
Yeah.
those things as good or bad. Like being a doctor is good, being a felon is bad. Interestingly, being a physician, there was a lot of wonderful things about it, but it
Mm.
was really bad for me. I never felt good enough. I had a lot of animosity towards the industry because of
Mm-hmm.
all of my injuries. And ultimately, it's what gave me the access to the
Wasn't
drugs,
good.
which
Right.
ended me up in prison.
Wasn't
It
good.
wasn't good
No.
for me. That's not good. That's not good. On the other hand, it got me honest.
Yeah.
It got me humbled. It got me to realize
Yeah.
what's really important in life. So, like, those labels are societal labels. And when I can realize that I don't have
Yeah.
to buy into that, no one
No,
has
you've
to
been
buy
set
into
free.
that.
I mean, I think it's being set free from your mind is a big deal, because I think everybody has prisons in their own mind that they've built up. Whether it be a bad job, bad
100%.
childhood, bad divorce, bad whatever, bad health, whatever those things are. Being able to break through that is the real freedom, and that's what you're talking about, Myra. And
Yeah, that saying that freedom,
yeah,
that prison sets you free is so true. But I didn't understand that until I was there. I realized how judgmental and how
yeah,
closed-minded and what a negative like perception I had of the world. So it was
oh yeah,
very
no, I mean,
eye-opening for me. I'm much more
you talked
compassionate.
about perception a lot. It changes, totally changes your perception, because there's a lot of what you find is there's a lot of good
Absolutely.
people that you meet in prison that had issues and they're working through them, but that doesn't make them a bad person. They just had issues, and
Not at
that's
all.
one of the biggest
Not
eye
at all.
openers for me, for sure. I got a question for you, Myra. I'm, your story is so fascinating on so many levels. What if what do you think is your biggest takeaway through all this that you've experienced?
My biggest takeaway.
It could be a couple of things.
Yeah, I think it's hard to put it into one. I think what I just said about not buying into societal perceptions that that
It's
I get
huge.
to decide that, like, being a doctor isn't necessary. Like things are not necessarily
Right. It
good
doesn't check
or
the box
bad.
off. That if I
They
do
can
that, that's good. Yeah.
no, good or
Right.
bad doesn't really exist. It's just what are the consequences of that and how does it affect your life? That
Yeah.
whole good or bad label just truly doesn't exist. And I think the most important part of that is for myself and my own self judgment. Like, I'm not
Yes.
good or bad. You know, I read something that about the moon, and that if you look at half of the moon and you're like, oh, the bright half, that I'm good. And the dark half is I'm bad. But both halves
Mm.
always exist. It's a
That's
whole. And just to learn not to live in the extremes. The world is not dichotomous. It's not black or white. It's not good or bad. It's not right or wrong. It's messy. And the quote good or bad exist together. And what's one person perceives as bad, if you turn it around, can be really beautiful. And what's really beautiful, if you turn it around, can be really ugly. So the beautiful thing is our perception and how we look at things and how we view the world and work can
Myra,
change.
meet Myra
And
Mabry,
I think
the
that's my
life
big
coach, right
takeaway.
there. Right there. That's Myra Mabry, the life coach. Are you doing the life coaching now? Because I
I'm
hope that
starting
people
it.
can
I've
reach
been
out to
through.
you by listening to this, because I think you have so many things that you could help with people, Myra. And I so want you to follow through with it, because I think you could really have a huge impact on people's lives by making yourself available to people to need it. They need help. People need help.
That means a great deal to me. And honestly, I had said this to you. I kind of hunted you down because I needed a launching pad, and I want to do public speaking. I want to reach out to people. I want my story to help other people. It's what I've always been, like you said. I've been a coach as a teacher.
Yep.
I've been a coach as a doctor,
Yeah,
and
and
now
you,
I'm just
and
going to be
tell
a
you what, you'd be
coach.
an awesome speaker for
And
people, because you have exactly that. Whatever that thing is, that intangible thing that you want to listen to, Myra. That's what you have, and you got so
oh,
many things that you can share. What you just said on your takeaway is unreal. I love it.
thank you. Thank you. And thank you for creating this space for people like me. And I hope you realize the impact it has on us. Like, this helps me rid shame. This gives me
Um,
self worth. And that's something I really need, especially in reentry. So you are such a gift
oh,
to people
Myra,
like
you
me. And
made
thank
my
you.
day. That makes me feel fantastic, filled up. For those out there who are, because obviously Myra needs to write a book, so we'll be looking for that, and we'll be looking for a speaker, and we'll be looking for her to be this coach. In the meantime, go out and get my book, Nightmare Success. It's on Amazon, Barnes and Noble. I love it when you guys, we've been taking off on the likes and the social media and the comments stuff. It's really good because it creates more listeners. If you got time, I know it's a hassle. I know it, but it's such a big deal because it puts the show on stars. If you got time to go to Apple and leave a review. And if you want to know anything more about me, what's going on, sprintcassidy.com. I spell it wrong. It's TY. It's not a DY. All my life growing up, I wanted to be Sean and David's brother, but it's just spelled wrong. It's just, I can't even say we're cousins.
I knew
Can't even say
David
we're
Cassidy, by the
cousins.
way.
Uh, I want to thank Homestead Financial. They have a great place for me to do my podcast here. If anybody's looking for their home mortgage needs, Greg Afdiev is your guy. Myra, thanks so much for being here. You're fantastic.
Oh, Brent,
For
thank
all you
you.
out there, as I used to say when I was writing my emails back and forth from Leavenworth, stay strong. I'll do the same. Nightmare Success, in and out.